Hello there, people, and welcome to another episode of Flight Box. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. I know that we are smack dab in the middle of DC Mania because we are T-minus 22 days, or is it 21 days away, from the release of Superman on July 11th. But we're taking a bit of a break here on Flight Box to talk some Marvel, because next week, actually less than a week from today, we've got the premiere of Ironheart on Disney+, the brand new Marvel Cinematic Universe TV series, which wasn't getting a whole lot of press and a whole lot of play until about the last month or so. So, in preparation for that, I used that as an excuse to get caught up on a number of Marvel live-action TV shows that I had not watched. I did not get through all of them, but I did get through most of them. What I did was I rewatched Hawkeye, because infamously I watched the first 5 episodes of that show as they released, and for some reason never watched that season finale that, ended the whole thing. So went back and rewatched it and finally finished it, watched that final episode, and then I continued on to watch Echo, and then I watched a big one, She-Hulk, because I didn't even watch that one live. So all of the controversy, all of the caterwauling, all the stuff that was going on in the fandom at the time that show was premiering, I saw from afar and, did not offer any of my own personal commentary on it because I didn't even know what was going on. Like, I knew there was some controversy involving Megan Thee Stallion and twerking, and I knew that Daredevil was in the show, but that was about it, right? And CGI. I mean, all manner of complaints about CGI. But I had stayed away from that and did not launch into it live. And yet, it's amazing, like, those 3 shows that I just listed off. I didn't watch or I didn't finish any of them, but I finished Secret Invasion. I finished and also own Moon Knight. Yes, I love Moon Knight. Moon Knight was awesome. I am in the pro Moon Knight camp as far as that show goes. But I jumped headfirst into Daredevil Born Again, even though I wasn't caught up on any and everything involving the new version of Kingpin, the new/not-so-new version of Kingpin, played by Vincent D'Onofrio. Yeah, it didn't make any sense. Me being a completionist, I didn't go back and, again, finish Hawkeye and go through Echo before starting that show. But it doesn't matter, because I'm caught up now, and that's what tonight's episode is about. I'm getting caught up on those thoughts in preparation for Ironheart. Yes, I know I didn't have to watch them for Ironheart. There's no homework problem here necessarily. But I did seriously use them as an excuse to get caught up. I used Ironheart as an excuse to get caught up on live-action Marvel TV series. As of now, the only 2 that I haven't watched yet that I will watch are Agatha All Along, which I was planning on watching, but I found out that was 9 episodes instead of 6. And yeah, didn't have time to do that because it's hard to do that over the course of a week, as weeks are currently constructed in my real life at the moment. And I haven't watched season 2 of Loki, so I need to get those underway at some point here, and I will in the not too distant future. And then at some point I gotta dive into What If, because I have seen none of What If. But no bother, that's still on the list. Before diving into the 3 shows that I'm going to talk about tonight, of course, I want to remind everybody listening to this show that you can find it at theflightcast.com, along with all of my other shows, including the main show, The Flightcast, where I just did a deep dive breakdown of the Rolling Stone interview piece on James Gunn. Lots of cool information, lots of cool tidbits, and I break it down thoroughly, as I've done before, with past and present articles, if you will, from Rolling Stone, Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, Variety, whichever of the trades. Vanity Fair, of course, for Zack Snyder's Justice League. That was a great piece by Anthony Bresnick a couple of years ago when that released on HBO Max. But yeah, breakdown of the James Gunn Rolling Stone piece was my most recent episode of the Flightcast this past Tuesday. There's this show that comes out on Thursdays talking about TV. We will be talking Ironheart next week. So same time next week, Ironheart episodes 1 through 3. We'll give you the review on that. And then weekends are for Flight Chat, the listener feedback show. Those of you that want to send in your emails, want to send in your comments and your posts, whatnot, on the YouTube channel or anywhere else, the Facebook page, wherever you've got it, that's what the weekend is for. Flight Chat, we're going to have a doozy of an episode this weekend because we've got some emails to get caught up on from last week, because no episode due to Father's Day, due to the holiday and whatnot. Again, hope everybody had an awesome Father's Day. But either way, you can find all those shows at theflightcast.com or wherever you get your podcast, whether it is Apple Podcasts, whether it is the Flightcast YouTube page, whether it is Spotify, whether it is Pandora. You can find the Flightcast on all of those platforms or wherever you get your podcast. And of course, I want to take a moment to thank everybody that is a loyal supporter of patreon.com/theflightcast. Thank you so much for those of you subscribed. I did do a recent Friday Flight episode talking about some Superman final trailer thoughts and my excitement that Krull is finally coming to Steelbook in 4K format. Yes, that was last week's Friday Flight. Tomorrow's Friday Flight, I think I'm going to break down the Entertainment Weekly interview that they did with James Gunn. Because, yeah, the Superman press tour is, like, hot and heavy at this point. Understandably so, with 3 weeks until release. But the great thing about these one-on-one interviews is that there is different information. I did skim through a bit of the Entertainment Weekly piece today, and there's some different questions, there's some different answers, there's some different perspectives in that interview than there was in the Rolling Stone piece. So look for a breakdown of that on Friday Flight on Patreon tomorrow, because I definitely want to talk about that. I am just fully immersing myself in DC Studios and DCU and all the hype and circumstances we get closer and closer to what I hope will be a fantastic experience with Superman. There's a lot of hopes, a lot of hope riding on this for those of us that want to see DC succeed on the big screen and want to see the DCU get off to a good start. Here we're hoping, fingers crossed, seriously, man. But yeah, stay tuned for that. Stay tuned also for upcoming episodes of Flight Report, because yes, I will be reading All-Star Superman and Superman for All Seasons, the books that inspired Superman, as James Gunn has told us. I'll be reading those for separate episodes of Flight Report as well here in the next coming weeks before we get to the big review of Superman on July 11th. Of course, I'll be seeing it on July 8th, the Amazon preview screening, but stay tuned for that, plus all the other nearly 200 pieces of bonus content that are available at patreon.com/theflightcast. Hope that you're enjoying all of that. Anybody that is interested, you can go there and sign up to be a flight officer, and you can check all of that out, and stay tuned for the new content as well. Thank you so much for supporting patreon.com/theflightcast, and hope that you all enjoy that bonus content. All right, let's get into it. I watched these three shows in chronological order release-wise, I think. I'm not sure. But I started with Hawkeye because that was the one that I had watched before. Like I said, it was really weird. I watched the first 5 episodes as they aired, if you will, as they released on Disney Plus, and then just did not watch that season finale. But this time I watched all of it, and I felt that, instead of just going to watch the finale, I wanted to rewatch the whole thing because it'd been a couple of years. It'd been a minute. I mean, when did that show release? That show released Christmas, holiday season of 2021, which of course was timely since it's essentially a Christmas series in that regard. We've been having discussions lately about what are Christmas movies and what are not. Die Hard is a Christmas movie, by the way, but that's a whole other discussion. At any rate, digging back into this show, I really like this show. Like Hawkeye was really good. Like, I'd forgotten like the whole thing was about Ronin and about like his time as Ronin, and the whole thing about the suit, and the fact that Kate was the one that commandeered it and started all this trouble because they thought Ronin was back in town, and it really stoked a lot of like energies, and also kind of exposed like the Russian mob stuff, like the tracksuit mafia and all that. I'd forgotten about like all of that. The Echo part I had remembered. Like I remembered Alaqua Cox playing Echo, and I remembered like the whole circumstances surrounding her, at least most of the circumstances, the fact that she was connected to Kingpin, called Kingpin uncle because he essentially like raised her. Like those bits and details I remember, but there was a lot of other stuff that I did not remember. And I got to tell you, it's interesting watching this show now, right? Like watching Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop in this show after seeing Sinners is kind of a trip. It really is. And don't get me wrong, I've been a fan of Haley Steinfeld since True Grit, because that was the first thing I saw her in. What was that, 2010? That True Grit came out. Now I got to look this up. Yes, 2010 was when she played Maddie Ross in the True Grit remake, the reboot with Jeff Bridges, Matt Damon, Barry Pepper, Josh Brolin. Yeah, so I've been a fan of hers like since then. There hasn't been like too many other things of hers that I've watched, but she's had like quite the career like since then. She's done a whole lot. A version of Romeo and Juliet. She was in Ender's Game. When Marnie was there. Really? Oh, she's in When Marnie Was There. That's a Studio Ghibli film. All right. Got to watch that pretty soon. Uh, Edge of 17, Bumblebee, the Dickinson series, and of course, Kate Bishop. She is, a major part of what many are still considering the Young Avengers in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I know a lot of people, like, as far as Hawkeye goes, like the clips that you see a lot are with her and Yelena in those last 2 episodes, like specifically episode 5. And that was another reason, that I was really curious, to dig into Hawkeye again, because, having seen Thunderbolts and, talking to, friends and coworkers in real life, they were like, listen, Ray, we're going to go see Thunderbolts. What should we see beforehand? And I told them all, I said, you should see Black Widow. You should definitely see Black Widow so you have some, if you haven't seen it already, so that you have some type of like basis contextually for Yelena and for her father, Alexei. And really that's it, because, I mean, you could watch Hawkeye, but you don't necessarily have to, because it's really only those last 2 episodes that connect to Yelena in that regard. And not that they aren't important. I mean, they're cool, but it's not necessarily part of the contextual homework problem. Because I do agree, Anthony brought this up on Threads the other day. I do agree that it's not necessarily a strict homework problem in terms of like if you watch a movie in the MCU or a show in the MCU out of order, you're not going to be lost as far as what's going on because you didn't watch the other movies or shows. However, if you want full context, if you want the full understanding of what's going on with characters, then that's when it does behoove you to watch some of the previous stuff just to see what their perspective is the next time you see them in a movie or a show. And so here, I get the angst that people have about the Young Avengers, kind of being sidelined because at this time, Young Avengers was still definitely a thing. It was still something that people were like looking forward to. And, you know, as far as the post Infinity Saga stuff, right, there are people, there are a bunch of different directions, a couple different directions that many of us, I think, have wanted to see Marvel Studios go in particular directions after the Infinity Saga ended. I'm a proponent of where are my uncanny X-Men. I want that to happen. I feel like that should be the next step for Marvel. I wasn't necessarily feeling multiverse saga and let's do all this stuff with Kang. Well, no, not Kang now Doctor Doom, Robert Downey Jr. Not necessarily like a big proponent of that. Of course, I'm going to watch it. Cautiously optimistic about that stuff. But I want to see the uncanny X-Men take center stage and lead the MCU into a new era. There are plenty of people out there that feel that should be the Young Avengers. You had Kamala Khan do her thing with Ms. Marvel, which is a fantastic MCU series as far as I'm concerned. She's kind of leading the way, right? You've got Riri Williams as Ironheart. She's going to get her own show next week, like I mentioned. And you got Kate Bishop here, right? And Haley Steinfeld does a fantastic job. The chemistry that she had with Jeremy Renner was dynamite. I mean, it was awesome. And this show had a lot of heart. Hawkeye, again, just revisiting it, it really had a lot of heart, not just because of the redemption story with Clint Barton and this idea of really trying to put aside his past and that dark time he had in the 5 years of the blip, where he was Ronin and he was just an absolute merciless, vicious terror on the underworld, right? Like he's trying to put that aside. That's why he's, trying to help Kate get rid of the suit and toss away this whole Ronin idea, but it stokes the tracksuit mafia stuff. And some of this tracksuit mafia DNA, I'm sure, carried over into the organized crime stuff that Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin, was putting together for, what is happening now in Daredevil Born Again. Yes, seeds were planted and laid, groundwork was laid for all of that stuff later on in this series, between this and Echo for sure, which I'll get to here in a little bit. But I like the heart of this show because, at the end of the day, you could tell that this wasn't just a throwaway show. This was actually, they took some time for character development, right? And again, the chemistry between Kate and Clint is hilarious and really well done. This idea of the hero worship, I like the fact that they tied it into her being a survivor of the Battle of New York, but through all of the chaos, even though she lost her father to basically imprint her hero worship on Hawkeye, because she saw him kick ass in the Battle of New York, and that was one of those things that I've talked about for a number of years, where there's always been this argument, this discussion about collateral damage in the MCU, and how back in the day the DCEU absolutely addressed it, absolutely acknowledged it, absolutely made it a point of order. But the MCU never really touched on that a whole lot. They started to, I want to say, after Age of Ultron. And there's, different schools of thought. I used to debate this with Brent all the time over on Fans Without Borders because, I had said that you can do the collateral damage aspect from the beginning. You don't have to wait until, phase 3 or 4 to do that with the audience. And he argued otherwise. He said, you earn the audience's trust in the first 2 phases, and then you can lower the boom with stuff like Infinity War and Civil War, even, right, with respect to, the Sokovia Accords and how the Avengers' actions are affecting people on the ground, right? I mean, I still feel like you could have done that after the first Avengers film, especially with all the carnage and chaos that happened in the Battle of New York. Marvel Studios took a different tack with it, didn't really start to deal with civilian casualties until, again, after Age of Ultron, going into Phase 3. And this is another part of that where it's like, okay, let's wind the clock back all the way to the Battle of New York and let's show that Kate was a victim. She lost her father in the Battle of New York, but Hawkeye was a source of inspiration for her, and now she's become a badass archer in her own right. And just the reluctance of him taking her under his wing, but still caring enough and still having enough of a heart to help her through it and to settle this Ronin problem, to help bury his past and do the right thing, even though he's trying to get home to his family. And one of the other things I really liked about this is I really enjoyed the dynamic with him and his wife. And Linda Cardellini has, done an impeccable job doing that, because this is one of those cases where, you really get into the nitty gritty. It's like, okay, Hawkeye is one of the Avengers that does not have powers. He's a human, right? Him and Natasha were the humans. So, like, what is his family life like? Like, when we found out he had a family in a farmhouse in Age of Ultron, it's like, okay, well, how's the family dealing with him being a part of this superhero vigilante team? And I love how supportive his wife is, right? The kids are the kids, and they just want their dad home for Christmas. And that does end up happening. I'm glad that they did get that finality, if you will. But the whole reason he's delayed, they didn't go the stereotypical route, the planes, trains, and automobiles route, for lack of a better way to put it, where the mom was also upset, where the wife was also upset, right? Like, she got it. She understood. She helped him, right? Like, she was helping him, like, from afar, like, looking stuff up, like when he was trying to find that watch from the Avengers compound. Like, she helped him piece stuff together. She understood, right? Like, this was a situation where the wife wasn't, being unreasonable. Like, she's got her limits too as well, but in this case, she's going to mind the fort. She's going to try and keep the kids under control because she knows he's doing the right thing, and she supports him 100%. And she knows that he's not trying to ditch out on the family, that he really is trying to fulfill his promise. And so I just like that dynamic. I really enjoyed that they didn't go stereotypical family is at odds with him and disappointed with him on the whole because he's not home for Christmas quite like he said he was going to be. The wife at least supported it while the kids were being impatient. I like that. And again, it worked out really well. And I like that he brought Kate with him at the end of it. So finally seeing that final episode, was it a little hokey? Yeah, a bit. The final episode was a bit of a cluster in terms of the final battle and the stuff with the ice rink and how they dealt with the tracksuit mafia. Yeah, a little hokey, a little fast paced, little like cobbled together a bit, but it didn't bug me. It really didn't bother me at all, to be honest with you. I accepted it for what it is, and was looking for a good action packed climax. The whole twist with her mother, Vera Farmiga's character, being the one that was like in cahoots with Kingpin and then trying to get out, and then it's like, well, he's going to send his people to take her out. Well, no, that's on brand for Kingpin. That totally makes sense. And I remember at the time that was like a big thing for us because we were still in this weird gray area of where do the Marvel Netflix shows fit into the MCU canon, because it still wasn't copacetic, right? Like the Daredevil Born Again plan, I don't think had necessarily, like maybe it was close to being announced. I don't remember exactly when that was announced, but we hadn't seen anything tangible yet. So it was still a one-way street as far as the shows have acknowledged the movies haven't acknowledged the shows. And that's, of course, completely changed now, because now that you've got MCU shows that are being made specifically to connect to the films, and also you put Matt Murdock in Spider-Man No Way Home, right? So there's no not connecting that. Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock in one of the biggest Marvel Cinematic Universe movies in the last 5 years, right? Like that's a big deal, right? So, from that point on, it's like, okay, Daredevil is a part of this, and when they decided to bring back Karen and Foggy and really make Daredevil Born Again season 4 of the Marvel Netflix series, like there's no question now as far as connection, but that wasn't so solid back in the day, back at that time when Hawkeye came out. So just the fact that D'Onofrio was coming back to play Kingpin, that was cool. Really like that. And that's where the synergy of bringing the Marvel Netflix stuff started. I know there are many of us that are hoping for that synergy to continue, and I think Kristen Ritter is going to be in Daredevil Born Again season 2, if I'm not mistaken. I think she is reprising her role as Jessica Jones. That's cool. That's awesome. Look, I didn't need them all to be in that bar at the end of Daredevil Born Again season 1, but if they want to bring back Mike Coulter, if they want to bring back Finn Jones, I'm not anti-Finn Jones. I'm not. If they want to go in a different direction with Danny Rand, they can too. But I liked Iron Fist season 2. Season 1 was nah, but season 2 was actually really good. I wanted to see where they'd go from there, right? And bring Colleen back too. Colleen and Misty Knight, whatever. I'm getting ahead of myself. Back to Hawkeye. I liked it. It's a really good show. Like if I were ranking it to the others, I mean, certainly I would put it ahead of Secret Invasion. I would probably, as far as heart, it might have the most heart of the Marvel series that I've watched to this point. To be honest with you, I think it really does have a lot of great emotional moments. That, like I said, the stuff between Clint and Kate, Some of the stuff with Maya slash Echo's backstory, especially when it came to, how she was brought up and like her upbringing criminally and, her relationship with her father and how Ronan destroyed that and her quest for vengeance and learning the truth about the situation and just, what Alaqua Cox did to kind of steal the show for a lot of the scenes that she was in, in this particular show. And that's really, I think, what led to the Echo show, becoming what it was and spinning off in that regard. Like she really was a strong character in this series. But I don't think there was really so much of a weak link in the cast in the show, to be honest with you. Even Jack, right? Jack Duquesne, like that Tony Dalton, the way that he played that character, it was, and I don't know a whole lot about the Swordsman. Like this is one of those cases where like I don't have, me being a comic novice and all of this, like I don't have any prior like understanding or expectations of these characters, but he was fine. I didn't have any issues. He was very eccentric. He was the most eccentric character in the show, but that was funny. That was cool. I dug that part of it, to be honest with you, with respect to what he was doing. So yeah, no, I really liked this show. I thought it had a lot of good moments. I thought one of the stronger shows. Like if I have to rank it, like it's tough ranking these shows. Like I got to look at the list and because I don't think I've ranked the shows really. I know WandaVision is phenomenal. So is the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Loki season 1 was really good. I think I'd probably put Hawkeye like on that level. Like those shows, like it's close to Ms. Marvel in terms of like relatability, in terms of like tone and whatnot. Even though Ms. Marvel is a bit more humorous, but still has a lot of serious, heavy, emotional moments as well, and has a lot of heart as well in that show. I think that's probably a good comparison. Is those two shows in that regard? I don't know how well it compares to even Moon Knight and some of the others. I guess it does compare a little bit more to Moon Knight, even though that's a bit heavier with some of its subject matter as well. But yeah, definitely one of the brighter stars, one of the brighter, MCU shows for sure. And to be fair, even with Secret Invasion, like it's not that I dislike that show. I don't dislike it. I just, I'm one of those people that had, maybe some higher preconceived expectations for it, thought it was going to go in a different direction than it did, and when it didn't, I was like, well, okay, they've decided to make it an action vehicle. Whichever, Hawkeye, I think, was very tonally consistent with respect to what it was doing. Oh, and the Rogers musical, corny, silly. Whoever wrote that, wow. But it was also realistic because you can imagine in a universe like the MCU, somebody writing a musical in that vein based on what happened at the Battle of New York. So it was realistic in that sense, or understandable in that sense, I guess is a better way to put it. And also Hawkeye's reaction, just kind of like the not that he was necessarily pained, but just like, yeah, I did. This is no, thank you. And he was really annoyed that Ant-Man wasn't even in it. And I'm like, yeah, I'd be annoyed too. Ant-Man was nowhere near, like he wasn't even introduced. He didn't have his movie yet when the Battle of New York happened. So just like little inconsistencies and stuff like that. But no, I dug Hawkeye. It is one of my favorite shows in the MCU, and I'm glad that I own it. I have like all of the current phases, like all the releases, all the physical releases. I've got both seasons of Loki. I've got Moon Knight, I've got Falcon and Winter Soldier, I've got WandaVision, and I have Hawkeye. So, just waiting for Ms. Marvel and some of the others to get released for sure. But Hawkeye definitely ended up being a really good show. All right, so after Hawkeye, I watched Echo, which I guess came out last year. Did it really come out last year? See, the timeline for all of this is way off. So, no, Echo came out like after She Hulk, right? Like, first it was Hawkeye, then it was She Hulk, and She Hulk actually came out after Ms. Marvel and I forget what else, but like, Echo is a recent show, like within the last year or so. And it's a very different show. I didn't dislike it. It's not necessarily my favorite. There are a number of things about the show that I really did like. Alaqua Cox was really like very good in the role. I really like her tenacity and her energy that she brings to the role, and the cultural significance of her being indigenous and the use of indigenous peoples in this film, the Choctaw representation, right? Which that's cool, especially again after having watched Sinners and seeing how the Choctaw people were represented in that film back in a period piece, and now seeing this is a show like centered around the Choctaw natives, right? The Choctaw people, like the Choctaw tribe in that regard. Like that's cool. That type of stuff, because I'm a huge fan of representation matters, and especially for indigenous people. Come on, they were here before any of the rest of us were, with respect to the United States of America, right? As far as this land, the North American continent, if you will. So when they get a show front and center in something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, however smaller it is in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. I'm glad this show exists. It's not like on the same level, it doesn't necessarily have the same straight. To me, it's like a Western. Like the show really did present itself like an old school grounded Western in that regard. And it does have some supernatural elements. I am not familiar, I'm not very well versed in the Echo character, and if I go to the wiki for my knowledge on it, Echo, Maya Lopez, first appeared in Daredevil #9. She was also Ronin in the New Avengers. Okay, so that's where the Ronin stuff comes from. All right, I get that. A Cheyenne woman, and her background as an indigenous character informs many of her arcs and storylines. Okay, well, they're right there. That ties into the show very well. She's also half Mexican American. Her Echo guise includes a white handprint that covers part of her face. She's one of the few deaf comic book characters that is accurate in real life, casting a deaf actress to play the character, and has also adopted the Ronin code name and was a host of the Phoenix Force. The adopted daughter of the supervillain Kingpin, also a supporting character of the superhero Matt Murdock / Daredevil. She's been a member of the Avengers and the New Avengers at various points in her history. All right, so with respect to this show, like detailing like her background and her history and her tortured past and sort of her anger, like she's got anger issues. She's definitely got anger issues. And, after discovering the truth about how Kingpin had her father killed, she puts a bullet in his head. And the presumption is that Kingpin is dead. And of course he's not, right? And that's the other weird part, right? It's like, of course, watching this after watching Daredevil Born Again, it's like, okay, I know he's not dead. Of course he's not going to be dead. That would have been a bigger deal, right? But yeah, just so you know right off the bat, like an episode or two in, it's like, yeah, they're not killing D'Onofrio's Kingpin off like that. So that's going to be an arc. And he's in the show a good deal, like, as far as providing a foil and, basically being the primary antagonist because she's out for vengeance, right? Initially, she was after Hawkeye / Ronin for vengeance over her father's death, and now that's all about taking down and destroying Fisk's empire, like the taking down the Kingpin's structure in that regard, right? And that's where I guess the show is a bit weaker because it doesn't really dive into the extent of Kingpin's operation, and we don't really see. I mean, there's some, there's some flashpoints, there's some linchpins with respect to, him being upset and his people lashing out and trying to get back at her for what she's doing in terms of disrupting their operations. But there's not a whole lot of depth with respect to that portrayal. And this is really more about Maya and how she affects the little town in Oklahoma that she's in when she comes back, right? And all the others that are involved and are basically like, we just make sure she's passing through. Don't tell her that, don't tell her best friend, that grew up with her that she's back. And, let's treat this with kid gloves because we don't want her bringing a war to this town, right? In that regard. And that part, I think, is some of the strongest parts of the show in that regard. Just in terms of everybody. And again, the representation, like I did not know that Graham Greene was in this. Graham Greene is like probably the best indigenous that guy, right? I mean, the first thing I saw him in was Die Hard with a Vengeance, but of course he's in Dances with Wolves. He's been in a number of other movies playing, an indigenous character because he is an indigenous person, a descendant in that regard. So cool to see him in there for representation purposes, and to see other actors like Tantu Cardinal. She's Canadian, she's Cree and Métis. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Made a member of the Order of Canada for her contributions to the growth and development of Aboriginal performing arts in Canada. She's Chula, the grandmother, Maya's grandmother. She was awesome, and I like the whole thing about Maya's heritage and those parts, like all that stuff, the mystical stuff, like the mystical, like indigenous people stuff. I like that. I like that a lot because again, it's part of the representation matters, and it's whenever these shows, whenever these movies, whenever these projects highlight a culture, highlight a minority culture like that, in front and center, and be as accurate as you can within the framework of the universe that you're working with, right? Treat the culture with respect and, give it the gravitas. The idea of her being not just a strong, Choctaw member of the Choctaw Nation, but also a strong woman. And, the power of her ancestors, right? And that was the thing, like each of the episodes starting with a different story, a different tale about a different ancestor, going all the way back, and then progressing forward into the tribes and into the old west, and basically banding together to give her the strength to do what was necessary in that end. I would say that the personally, right, this particular like final episode of this miniseries, I think had a stronger ending, as far as the character than Hawkeye did, and less clunky in that regard. I'll say that, right, because it was fast. It's only 5 episodes. But again, it's a very personal story. This isn't like an overarching thing. You're not looking for a ton of connective tissue with the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe like Hawkeye has, right? Like that's not what this show is about at all. This is a very personal, limited series about this particular character. And I applaud them for making this. I applaud them for this show actually existing, because I think it is important to highlight a character like that and to, basically, not necessarily proof of concept. I mean, kind of, but just the idea that this is what you can do. This is how you can expand other characters, right? Not everything in the MCU has to point to something else. And that's been a difficult lesson that Marvel Studios, I don't know that I think they're still learning it, truthfully. I mean, they're still kind of like, in between, like, okay, what do we do? Where do we go? Like, how do we move forward? How do we differentiate our content post Infinity Saga? And if you take a swing for the fences on a show like this, you're not going to get the same audience that you would get for a Ms. Marvel, the same audience that you would get for a WandaVision, the same audience that you would get for a Hawkeye, or for Falcon and Winter Soldier. But you're going to get an audience nonetheless, especially when you represent a culture like indigenous peoples. Like that's a big deal. Like that's important. And I can't highlight that enough. That's the strongest part of the show, in my opinion. All the other stuff with respect to, what she's doing and, the war against Kingpin. I mean, all of that is fine, but it's not necessarily like, critically important in that regard. Because Echo really is not a standard superhero show. It's not that type of series. And even the point where she was starting to like manifest her strength and her powers, like at first it confused me, and then after a minute I got it. Especially after Chula explained to her, when she went to her and was freaking out, like, hey, when she finally got, was talking to her grandmother again, and was like, hey, I keep having these visions, this keeps happening, what is this? And when she explained to her what was happening, that's when I got it. I was like, oh, this is heritage. This is her lineage helping her. These are her ancestors coming to her in her moment of need. This is great. This is awesome. Like I dug that. Like I really dug that. That's, in my opinion, the strongest part of this show. And it's got its humor here and there. The one character, Biscuits, played by Cody Lightning. Yeah, he's what the wiki says, he's fun loving and good natured, and basically becomes her sidekick. He's a goofball. He's a complete goofball, and he's the comic relief of a series like this. It's not completely like heavy handed. It's not completely like, like serious Western, but it really did feel to me like a Marvel Western, the way that they put a modern day Marvel Western in that regard. And if they had maybe to tell a story this personally, this is one of those cases where, like, okay, 5 episodes is what you needed. 5 episodes, you made it work in 5 episodes. I could have used another episode or two, truthfully, if you were going to stretch it out a little bit further. Maybe even introduce another one of her ancestors, although I did like how they tied in the ancestors at the end to what they were doing. I mean, and this isn't even like, this can be a limited series, right? You don't necessarily need to like continue forward with another season of this unless you are going to do Young Avengers and have her be a part of it. It says in the comics she's been a part of the Avengers before, so this is another one of those cases where anybody who's on the Young Avengers train, I get where you may be disappointed that it doesn't seem like they're going in that direction. At least they're not prioritizing that direction. They're all about Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars right now. And then after that, we're waiting to see what they do with the X-Men. That's what I'm waiting for. But the Young Avengers plan, the Young Avengers group, is there a way that you can salvage that? Is there a way that you can keep that going, right? Because do you really want to give up on what you've got with Kamala Khan and Ms. Marvel and what you're about to show us with Riri Williams and Ironheart, and also what you've done with Kate Bishop and Hawkeye? And then you can even bring Maya into that, right? If she's going to develop powers and if she's going to become an anti-hero, she could be someone that could certainly be a viable asset in terms of her strength and her, tenacity to a group like that, So I've talked about the importance of representation matters for Indigenous people, but also the importance for disabled people, for to have it not just her being deaf in real life, but also her being disabled, missing a leg, right? Like that's to show, and that was awesome in Hawkeye, right? When to see how much of a badass she was there, and to show even further how much of a badass she is here, and to they don't shy away from it, they don't move aside from it. I love the child actor that they've got, playing the younger version of her. I love that, how they put that together for that show. And for that show being like 2 or 3 years, I'd have to look into the behind the scenes, because that girl looked like she did not age a whole lot from when we saw her in Hawkeye as younger Maya compared to here. Did they shoot all those scenes beforehand? I don't know. I really don't know what the whole production for that was. I guess they did put that together early on, like earlier. But I mean, the budget for the show was only $40 million. I mean, that's that's a pittance, truthfully, for a studio like Marvel and for a parent company like Disney. So it's not like they wasted money on this. I like it better than Secret Invasion. I do. I like Echo better than Secret Invasion because, again, it's a more consistent tone, and it doesn't give us whiplash with respect to our expectations and with respect to what they do in terms of the plot. They remain consistent throughout all 5 episodes of this show. I could have used a couple more. This is one of those cases where it's like, okay, you know what? 5 episodes, cool. You could have given me a 6th or a 7th, right? Or maybe 9 would have been too much for a personal story like this, but I like the character development, and I like the cultural stuff that they placed into this particular show. That's the big highlight of it for me. And I don't have a whole lot more else to say about it, but I dug it. I dug it for what it is, and do I put it on the same level as a WandaVision or a Falcon and Winter Soldier? No, because it's not that type of a show. It is a very different type of series. But if you came to me and said, Ray, which one are you going to watch first, Echo or Secret Invasion? I will take Echo. Most certainly, I will watch Echo like quickly over Secret Invasion. And I didn't dislike Secret Invasion. I just, I have my thoughts with respect to Secret Invasion. Others have stronger thoughts with respect to Secret Invasion. And that's a show that tries to be overarching and connect all over the place with the rest of the MCU. A show like Echo that is kind of insulated from that, I think it benefits from being insulated from that. It can tell its own story. It can be more gritty and grounded and be more personable in that regard. So, yeah, I thought it was solid, truthfully. A solid modern day Marvel Western with that character. And, hopefully we do see more of it. I don't know what their plans are. I mean, it's really up in the air. I have not been tuned into the inside baseball whatsoever with respect to what they're going to do with it and where they're even going to go with the Young Avengers idea, if anything at all. But either way, I would not be upset to see Alaqua Cox come back as Echo and see more of her development as a character as Maya. I think she was awesome in the episodes of Hawkeye that we saw, and certainly getting her own series. No, I'm good with it, truthfully, if they decide to bring her back. So I guess we'll see exactly where they go from here. All right, now on to the controversy, She-Hulk. I think my thoughts on this are not going to surprise you if you have listened to my show for any stretch of time, especially the last couple of years. You know that I like the show. You know that if I'd been watching this show live as it was being released on Disney Plus, I would have defended it. You know that I think the Megan Thee Stallion thing is stupid. You know that I think the other complaints about her breaking the fourth wall and whatnot are stupid. You know how I feel about this show. You do. If you are somebody that has listened to any of what I've said, any of my opinions with respect to these fan complaints, you know good and damn well that I enjoyed the show, that I had fun with it, and that all the people complaining can sit and spin and pound the biggest pile of sand they can think of. What were we complaining about? No, look, here. Let's address the biggest complaint that people had with She-Hulk, the CGI. Here's the deal. No, it's not perfect. But remember, you're talking to the guy that is extremely forgiving when it comes to CGI. I forgive the PlayStation 2 graphics at different points of the third act of Black Panther. I do. That did not take me out of the movie. The movie was strong enough, especially for me personally, culturally, that I could look past that, right? Would I love for them to remaster that, maybe spend a little bit more money and make a home video copy or a copy of Disney Plus that looks stronger than what it did, closer to how great Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings looked. And that third act, yes, I would love to. But either way, it still didn't bug me because the movie itself was still incredibly strong and still, a top tier MCU movie for me. And so I look at She-Hulk. Is She-Hulk a top tier MCU show? Not necessarily, but is it really aiming for that? This show is clearly a sitcom, a lawyer sitcom, a superhero lawyer sitcom. She's dealing with cases in a new superhero law division, right? But here's the other thing about this. I guarantee this discussion was being had at the time, and I would have joined in heavily had I been watching this actively 3 years ago. But remember that the showrunner of this is Jessica Gao, a woman, and there is a lot of subtext. There are a lot of themes in this show that, look, whether you want to admit it or not, a man that is a showrunner of this would not have included that. All the little innuendos, all the stuff about that women go through, the mediocre men that they have to deal with, especially in a position like being a lawyer, right? The whole thing about how she really was, trying to be, a strong lawyer in her own right, and then she accidentally, gets Bruce's blood into her system, becomes a Hulk, but is definitely a more powerful. And this is even a commentary, right? How about this, right? And I guarantee they're essays and think pieces on this, and I'm just 3 years too late on it. Whatever, I'm giving my thoughts now. The whole point, the whole fact that when Bruce got his Hulk powers, his Hulk abilities, it created a split personality that he as a man had to deal with. And yet, when his cousin, Jennifer, gets the Hulk powers, she has the ability right off the bat to be able to balance it. No split personality. She can turn it on and off like a faucet. She has more control. What does that tell us? It tells us in not so subtle terms about how much stronger mentally and emotionally women are than men. That commentary was not lost on me whatsoever, and I don't disagree with it one bit. And listen, look at the state of the world right now. Tell me, look at our world leaders, look at the people in charge right now, and tell me that the women aren't more in check than the men are. And I'm not saying that there aren't crazy women out there as part of certain administrations. I'm saying look at the world leaders that are, have us on the brink of war, and then tell me if women in the same position would be just as temperamental and batshit as they are. I think not. And Jessica Gao understands that. Tatiana Maslany understands that. And if there is one regret that I have with respect to watching this show now, it's that this is my introduction to Tatiana Maslany as far as actually watching her work. I did not watch Orphan Black first. I am aware of Orphan Black. It is on the list. I will watch it at some point, but I did not get a chance to watch all of it before watching this series. So this is my introduction to her acting ability. Yes, I've heard amazing things about Orphan Black, and I would have loved to have, had that perspective on her acting before going into the show. Not how that worked out, but either way, I love her in this show. She's fantastic. She's hilarious, and I love the vulnerability that she displays. The fourth wall stuff I thought was clever. And I like fourth wall stuff like that, though, right? Beyond just the whole lazy comparison of, oh, it's just what Deadpool does. No, the fourth wall breaking is a thing that, happens in shows, happens in movies. My favorite example of it, truthfully, personally, is the show Burn Notice on USA. And that's not even a traditional fourth wall breaking, because it's not like he turns to the camera, Jeffrey Donovan is Michael West, and he doesn't turn to the camera and actually talk to you about what is happening. He narrates what he's doing like it's a How to Be a Spy series, right? Like every time he does some new stuff, some new MacGyver-like tricks and whatnot, he's explaining to you in a voiceover exactly what he's doing and why he's doing it in that regard. And I love that. Like fourth wall breaking and talking to the audience and stuff like that, I think when done cleverly is really awesome. And I think this show does it quite cleverly, especially with her acknowledging that she's in a television series. It works for the structure of the show. It works for the fact that it's a sitcom, a lawyer procedural sitcom in that regard. And I like the premise. Jessica Walters and what she deals with in the show is an allegory for what women have to deal with in real life. The whole idea of she's worked hard to get where she's, gotten to as a lawyer, has all manner of student loan debt and law school debt, right? And in her moment of need, if you will, right, she turns on the powers to save the courtroom from Titania, and then, immediately the law firm is like, well, we can't trust you because you're a super, you're fired. We're going to have to let you go. Nobody hires her for Jessica Walter's attorney because they can't trust her. They don't feel comfortable around her until the one law firm decides to hire her to head up their superhero law firm division, and they literally want her not for Jennifer Walters, but for She-Hulk. They want her to be She-Hulk lawyer. So that causes the whole, well, do they want me for me or do they just want the She-Hulk? And this is something that women have to deal with in real life. Do they really hire you for your talent and for your abilities and for what you can actually bring to the table, or just because you're eye candy, just because you're something nice to look at, just because you're something that can be the face of their organization? It's the real deal. Women have to deal with that. Like, that's the patriarchy, like, at work. This is Barbie all over again, okay? So I like that. I dig that stuff. Those types of allegories, especially when you can relate it like that in a superhero sense, I think that's cool. I think that's awesome. And I guarantee there are women out there that can relate to that. And you can tell with this cast and crew, you can tell that Tatiana Maslany and everybody else involved, they feel it. They get it, right? This is how, like, when you put a cast and crew together with this type of a premise, this is how you get, the most out of it. This is how you get extra energy, extra effort, because it's a subject that they're passionate about. It's a subject that they know intently as women, right? Like, they get it. They've lived it, right? Maybe not in a superhero sense, but they've lived this type of life where they've got to deal with all these pressures, they've got to deal with all these questions. And if anybody on this earth would get a complex, it would be women. But time and time again, they don't, and they persevere and they push through, and they do double what is necessary for a man to do in a lot of cases, especially in a profession like being a lawyer. You know what I mean? Like, I like how this was constructed. I do. I like how they built it. And look, fans suck. Fans are fickle about everything, and they've always got to find something to complain about. They're not happy if they're not miserable and complaining about something. So, yeah, doesn't surprise me that they were all like, this is bullshit, da 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 da. Doesn't surprise me that they felt that way at all. Not at all. But to me, I had a blast. I enjoyed watching this show, truthfully. I enjoyed the humor. I enjoyed the byplay. The CGI, getting back to that here, it doesn't bother me in this show nearly as much because it's supposed to look unnatural. Like, it's not supposed to look real. It's not supposed to be like Tatiana Maslany wearing green paint and having her features be completely matched to how she looks in real life. She's supposed to look otherworldly in that regard, right? It's not the same as certain other superheroes, right? Thor looks like Thor. Captain America looks like Captain America. Iron Man looks like Iron Man because his suit doesn't change like that, right? But when it's, super-powered beings that change their physical appearance, the Hulk is going to look different, okay? Thanos is going to look different. Like the aliens and whatnot and mutants are going to look different in that regard. So it doesn't bug me that she looks different, right? Yeah, and it's a TV show. Like, the budget, constraints and all that, whatever, they spend what they're going to spend. I was less concerned about that and more concerned about, what was inherently going to be, in the plot of the show. Like, what type of situations was she going to be placed in? And again, it was allegories all over the place, right? The fact that she got attacked, and for once in her life, she can walk down an alley and not be fearful, right? Not, come up with all the other tricks that women have to come up with just so that they can walk home safely at night, not worried about some dude or a group of dudes attacking her, which she totally got attacked by a group of dudes and completely called attention to how fragile they were, that like four guys, ganging up on one woman. And of course she kicked their asses, as, we wanted her to see. Like, there was a lot of misogyny in this show that was represented. And yes, the lawyer, the one dude that's, just peak misogyny. Yes, he's a one-note character. He's put there intentionally. That is his point. That is why he exists. That's also why Josh Segarra's character exists. Josh Segarra. Boy, have I had a tortured relationship with Josh Segarra. Josh Segarra, who plays Pug, okay? Obviously, I know him more than anything as Prometheus from season 5 of Arrow. I'm going into the well here, right? For anybody that has listened to me since all the way back in the days of Squadcast Media when Brett and I did DC TV Squadcast. If you go back to that 5th season of Arrow and you hear my thoughts with respect to it, and you can do that now over at Squadcast Media for the next couple of weeks, and then after a little while, all the stuff's going to get moved over to our YouTube channel for Squadcast Media. But if you go back and listen to my thoughts with respect to Prometheus, you will know that Josh Segarra absolutely threw me for a loop and tied me in knots for a whole season. I did not like him. His character annoyed the shit out of me, and not in a bad sense, right? Like, his character was extremely effective. His character was extremely, like, successful, and I don't like when certain villains like his are successful in that regard. It was pissing me off, and Brent was telling me all season, well, the Green Arrow was gonna win at the end of the season. And of course, when we got to the end of season 5, he didn't win. Prometheus won and totally hung us off a cliff until the beginning of season 6. So, yeah, I have a tortured relationship with Josh Segarra, and in the back of my head, whenever I see his face, no matter what he's in, whether it's Chicago PD or whether it's this, She-Hulk, I'm still going to have Prometheus in my head when I hear him speak. That being said, he was an awesome ally in this particular show, and even he is a little bit more one note, but he has a bit more dimensions, obviously, because he's the ally. He's the one that is respectful to women. He's the example of the man that is not disrespectful to his female compatriots and colleagues and co-workers at GLK&H. And you need him as a counterbalance to the other guy. You don't see a whole lot of the other guy. But the Megan Thee Stallion episode, okay, now that was funny because the whole idea, and this is where, like, me being a fan of sitcoms also probably helped me enjoy this show. Because the whole idea, there's a problem that has to be solved in terms of a legal issue, and at some point towards the end of the episode, a light bulb goes on, and this is how they're going to solve the problem. And when she basically displays that the other misogynist is delusional enough to believe that he actually would, find a way to get involved with Megan Thee Stallion and not an imposter, and that's why he should be awarded the $175,000 in damages because it was an Asgardian that was taking her place. Like, that was funny. Like, that made sense. Like, that part of the solving the problem, I thought, was entertaining in that sense. So to me, like, I didn't have any issues with that. I really didn't. And when Megan Thee Stallion shows up at the end of the episode to twerk in Jennifer's office with her, it's so the hell what? Who cares? Who gives a shit? Why is your ego that fragile, snowflakes? What is that? No, I don't have sympathy for people that are that upset, that were that incensed by it. Oh my goodness. To me, this is the quintessential, like, anti-nerd MAGA show. It is. It absolutely is, because it's women in the lead. It's about women. It's centered around women. It's about a woman, but it's about women in general and all the bullshittery that they have to face in the working world, especially being lawyers, right? Like, that just makes sense to me that they would, do something like that, that they would put a show together like this. And again, this is, pursuant one more time to representation matters. In this case, not in terms of an ethnicity, not in terms of, a culture, but in terms of gender, right? To have a woman front and center. Like, this is, for all the people that still get upset over, that obligatory scene of all the females, all the female Marvel heroes say she's not alone. And that one scene in Avengers Endgame that just pisses so many guys off. It's like, you know what? I don't care how, like, thin or, like, surface level that is. I mean, it was still cool to see that. If you have that big of a problem with it, that's your fault, right? But you'll have an even bigger problem with a show like this that decides to go further and actually decides to play it for what it actually is in terms of the plight of the female in our society and what she has to do and what a woman has to go through in our world, right? Like, that's really going to piss you off if that one scene in Avengers Endgame pisses you off that much. But I love that it's represented that way, and I love the allegory that they tell with this. I thought Tatiana Maslany was phenomenal as far as playing that particular role. The comedy, and there weren't any, like, overly cringy jokes or anything like that. At least not for me. I mean, the cringy stuff came from within the characters, but it was addressed in the show. Like the one dude, Mr. Immortal, who goes, dates, marries, has children with whatever woman, and then when the spark is gone for him, he kills himself. And now he's got a whole room full of women that he's jilted over the years, and he's come to the female lawyers to help him fend them off. And just the fact that they both turned the tables on him and were just like, no, you are disgusting. You are not dealing with your problems, not dealing with your feelings. No, we're not going to help you with this. This is going to be a learning experience for you in that regard. I thought that was awesome. I thought that was cool. If there was any character that didn't fully, like, annoy me in this show, if there was anyone that was just sometimes just like, okay, I don't really need, it was Nikki. Ginger Gonzaga's character, Nikki Ramos, Jennifer's paralegal and her best friend. Sometimes she got a little, but it was just her, how she was presenting, but she's playing a character that is important with respect to Jennifer's story, with respect to the setup. Like, they've got to have the friend. They've got to have the goofy friend that is going to tell them all the shit that they shouldn't tell them, going to give them all the secrets and do all the other extra shit and whatnot, like infiltrate the one place where the one group was the hackers and the dude bros that were trying to smear She-Hulk on the internet because they were, and again, allegories, guys. Like, I really do feel like anybody that was that pissed off, any man especially that was that pissed off at this show, was upset because they found themselves in it. Like, it represented either in that lawyer or in other male characters or in any of that group of guys that were trying to take She-Hulk down. And that whole scenario in the penultimate episode where she was getting that award and they threw the video of her having sex with the one dude, right, and embarrassed her in front of her own family, her parents, and everybody else, and she lashed out like anybody would expect her to. And of course, what happened? They threw the book at her. They threw her in the same damn prison that they had Abomination in, Blonsky in earlier, and I'll talk about him in a little bit here. But yeah, all of that is real. Women have to deal with that shit. That's not fake, right? Like, this is the Marvel equivalent of real shit that women have to deal with, right? As far as being torn down, being looked down upon, being treated as too emotional, too arrogant, too bossy, right? These are all the archetypes and all the stereotypical misogynistic bullshit that gets thrown on women when they're thrust into situations that are completely untenable. Who wouldn't be pissed off like her in a situation like that? If a man does that, it's understandable. Well, he was embarrassed. He had to get his aggression out. But a woman does that and, arrest her ass, lock her up, especially since she's got powers. It's bullshit. It's a double standard. It's ridiculous. And they understood that, and they told that well in this particular show. They related it in a Marvel sense, and I applaud them for that. I had no issues with any of that shit whatsoever. I really didn't. And I feel like a lot of the guys that had issues with it, you had issues because you saw yourself in there. You did. And you know what? That's your issue. You got to look at yourself in the mirror and figure out, hey, what's your problem? Why are you that upset about this? Why do you see yourself in any of these male characters? Why are you defending them, right? Whoever those people are. If I had been watching this show as it was airing, as it was releasing, oh boy, I would have started some shit. I absolutely would have gotten into some shit. The blocking would have been strong at that point. It would have been like, you assholes, da 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 this, da 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 that. Whatever. I enjoyed this show. The Blonsky stuff was cool. Now that, of course, ties into, and one of the things that this show does do is it really does connect the first Incredible Hulk movie. And, like any other fan, there is a bit of a disconnect cognitively because that's Edward Norton and not Mark Ruffalo. We know that it's the same character. We know that there have been references made to what happened in Harlem and what happened in that first movie, but there's even more references here because Blonsky's in the show. There's even a point where he and Bruce interact with each other again. They redesigned him, right? The same redesign that we saw in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which of course, came out, released the year prior to this. So the whole thing about him fighting in that fight club, when he was, the whole thing with Wong taking him there. And of course, Wong, when they bring him back, the whole guest star thing, Wong is cool. I mean, Benedict Wong is awesome. And there was that little brief point in time, right, for those couple of years where like Wong was the connective tissue between all these projects. It's like, put Wong in here. He'll connect this to the Avengers. He'll connect that to them. He'll connect this to the bigger picture. We'll see him in the post-credit scenes. We'll see him in this film and in that film, right? Like Wong was like the connector for everything, right? And that was kind of cool for a little bit. And of course, Jennifer made mention of that. Like everybody wanted to see Wong, right? But even like the guest star stuff that she was talking about, and I love the whole thing, how in the series finale, or the Kevin thing. Okay, yeah, I knew about that joke. I'd forgotten about it until it came up. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. True fourth wall breaking. They're basically treating Feige like he is this robot that is like pre-programming everything. Okay, you know what? He can poke fun at himself, especially at this point. He's made them billions of dollars, gobs of money. Go ahead, take the piss out of him a little bit. Poke fun at him. Yes, totally. That was cool. That you didn't have any issues with respect to that setup, especially since Jennifer had acknowledged that she was in a show. But I love the open where they basically did the homage to the Incredible Hulk show with Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno. I loved that. The way that they shot it, the way they put together the narration, that was cool. That was really good. I like the retro feel with her and Mark Ruffalo with respect to that. That was really cool. No, I had fun with it. I did. I had fun with the show, and I wasn't looking for anything majorly overarching about it. I'd take a second season of this show. Why not? Because I would be curious about other cases that she would try to litigate as a superhero lawyer in that regard. And the whole thing with her and Matt, and it didn't even occur to me initially. Like when he shows up, like I knew he was going to show up too. I knew about that, and I knew about the walk of shame. I knew that they got it on. I knew about that, right? And that's cool. But like, it didn't even occur to me like when she was going after the one superhero that was like trying to sue the costume maker for the the froggy costume, the faulty one that I guess like tore up his legs or whatever, right? And they wanted discovery in order to reveal the guy's clients, and so Matt comes in as a lawyer, and it didn't even occur to me. They had done that. They planned it as an Easter egg, the fact that this dude, this costume designer, had made the brown and yellow costume, which I guess is comic accurate. There are parts of the comic where he does have that particular costume, like color scheme, right? It didn't even occur to me that, of course, he'd call on Matt. And of course, Matt would argue in court that because this guy's clients are superheroes and their identities have to be protected because he doesn't want his identity exposed. It's like, oh, all of this hit me as a light bulb. I'm like, why the hell is Matt his lawyer? And then it hit as soon as he won that part. It was just like, oh yeah, he doesn't want people finding out he's Daredevil. But of course she does, because she does the one thing, when like they get into it, going after the froggy guy who turns out to be a villain because he kidnapped the costume designer in the first place. But like she does the one thing that other people just don't do, which is rip the mask off and immediately identify him. And it's like, well, she's got a size and strength advantage on him, so okay, I get that. But even their chemistry for the episode or two that they were in, that was cool. I really dug that, And of course, seeing Charlie Cox return, and yeah, the whole walk of shame thing was hilarious. He's walking out there in full costume the morning after with his boots in hand. It's like, yeah, that was funny. That was really good. And Charlie Cox, he has become kind of a bit of connective tissue with respect to this in terms of him being in different shows. He was in a flashback in Echo. I didn't mention that earlier, but of course, him being in a couple of episodes in this show, him now being back in the fray with Daredevil Born Again. I don't know if season 2 is finished filming or whatnot. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, him being in Far From Home, or not Far From Home, pardon me, No Way Home. Him being in No Way Home, like that is definitely like a nice piece of connective tissue as far as his character as well. So that's cool. I dug it. I like the show. I didn't go into it with a ton of expectations. The trailer made it completely obvious what it was going to be and the type of tone it was going to have. And anybody that has that big of an issue with it, that's a you problem. Because I enjoyed it. I had fun with it. I didn't have all these incredibly grand expectations about it. Did She-Hulk have that big of a fan base to have those kind of expectations? I mean, from what I know of the character, and I don't know that much about Jennifer Walters, they did seem to really give us an MCU version of that character. And look, guys, after 17 years, we have to expect that the MCU has its own timeline, its own way of doing things, and they're going to take a character and they're going to adapt it into their universe. They're not going to go straight out of the comics. They have not done that for the entirety of their existence. They've taken bits and pieces of the lore and they've given it to you in their form. That's what they're doing, and that's what they're going to continue to do. It's definitely what they should do at this point, because all comic book movies and shows are Elseworlds. They're not 100% accurate to the source material. I don't have any issues with this version of Jennifer Walters whatsoever. I'm fine with it. If they decide to make a season 2, cool. I will watch it, and I will probably enjoy it just as much as I enjoyed season 1. So that's really as much as I have to say about that, to be honest with you, with respect to She-Hulk. And that concludes my current bout of Marvel Cinematic Universe television catch-up, my thoughts on Hawkeye, Echo, and She-Hulk. So that'll do it for this particular episode of Flightbox. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting the Flightcast. I know that I'm like a day late and a couple of years short with respect to talking about these shows, but hey, if you have any thoughts on it, for those of you that did watch these shows when they released, any one of them, if you've got any thoughts with respect to any of my thoughts on Hawkeye, Echo, or She-Hulk, or if you have any other thoughts with respect to movies, TV, and other sort of media that you wish to share on Flight Chat, you know where to find me on Threads and Instagram at The Flightcast, on BlueSky at Flightcast. You can also comment on the posting for this particular episode at the Flightcast YouTube page. There's also the Flightcast Facebook page, and of course I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.